Ray Nitschke and, Paul Hornung, like all these older players that I shouldn't have any sense about. But when I was a kid, I read a ton of sports biographies. And so I would just take anything off the shelf and read them. And, a lot of these things are just sort of, dashed off in probably like 2 weeks or something. But I also every year from about age 8 or 9 on would get that big book that was the Pro Football Index that had everyone's stats and bios from the previous season in it. And then all the historical records. Remember that thing? It was like a big paperback book. And I would just go through and memorize information about like, Chuck Long or whatever, like I don't need to know about Chuck Long, but I know all of his stats inexplicably.
Yeah. I had one book. I didn't have the annual book. So I had this, like my little Bible of football was this by then outdated book, but I just liked it because it had some information about it. And it talked about like the 1934 NFL championship when the Giants beat the Bears because they went to Manhattan College and got some basketball shoes because the field was too icy, right?
Right.
And then the old days, there were coaches named Greasy Neal and players called like Buzz Nutter and Bronco Nagurski and Crazy Legs Hirsch. And it seemed actually it wasn't like the Bible. It was like Homer's Iliad or something. It basically was about this ancient time, which though when you think about like the 1940 NFL championship when the Bears beat the Giants 73-0, that was like basically 35 years before I discovered football when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Whereas now, like 35 years ago, that's like the Chicago Super Bowl shuffle,
Right. Like, that's the fridge.
Exactly. So like in historical terms, these Greek heroes that I was looking back on who wore leather helmets and played with broken noses and were called Crazy Legs, It wasn't that long ago, and it really goes to show that like the NFL is this real corporatized venture now. But there was a time when it was really trying. I mean, there was a time when there were teams like there were teams from Akron and Canton and so like within our lifetime, the NFL has become super professionalized. That we no longer have the Canton Bulldogs playing the Rock Island Independents in NFL games,
Right.
And so I feel like that history that I studied as a kid, nobody studies anymore. Basically, year one of football is Super Bowl one, and even that seems super old. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you because, I always get thrown off when they talk about the first Super Bowl champion being the Green Bay Packers, the first NFL champion. And I was like, but there was literally 50 years of history before that, because this is the 100th year anniversary of the NFL, right? 2020 is. Yeah. And so like I have all this obscure information about these teams that played in the 50s too, or the early 60s or pre-AFL, all that stuff. But it's basically just like saying, get off my lawn, like
right.
No 19-year-old cares about Bill Haley and the Comets, when they're buying their new Lizzo download. And when you think about it too, like the history of a sport is only matters to someone as it relates to their own team, I think. So that they don't really care about the Rochester Lancers or whatever. That was actually not a football team. That was a North American Soccer League team, but that's another story.
Another podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
That's another podcast. So I suspect if you're a New England Patriots fan or something, like an awful lot about the New England Patriots even before Tom Brady. If you're of a certain ilk, like if you're just 20 years old, maybe you don't care about Steve Grogan's really weird neck roll. Like maybe that doesn't interest you. Or that they once had a running back named Vegas Ferguson. Maybe they don't care about that, but I do.
Right. Well, if Grogan went to Kansas State, I know all this stuff. There could probably be a convention, like we're Star Trek nerds of the NFL of a certain generation, right?
Right.
That there's probably guys who are our exact same age who know exactly about Steve Grogan's neck roll because it was important to them.
Poor Steve Grogan. He's been forgotten over time.